Okay, so my name is Meena Thandavarayan. Now you know why I'm interested in data, right? So my name itself is a data management problem, right? So I'm called different people, by different names by different people. So when I grew up, I was called Sundaram. In school, I was called Meenakshi. In office, I'm called Meena. So that itself is a data management problem for me, and that is one of the reasons I'm more interested in data. I work as a solutions architect at AWS. My predominant focus is on strategic accounts. So I work with high-tech accounts like IBM, ADP, HP, and so on. So what we're going to discuss today is how do you get actionable insights into your data. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the technology aspects of AWS. What are some of the services that are used in terms of building your data platform and whatnot in this session. So before we get started, so that's a brave statement out that the world's most valuable resource is no longer oil but data, right? So there is some data about this, right? So one of Forrester's Forbes report says that by just making 10% of data more accessible, a Fortune 100 company can make 65 million increase in net income, right? So there is clear evidence that by being a data-driven company, you can start to make more profit out of it. So why is it difficult, right? So Forbes says that around 99% of businesses who want to be data-driven, only 24% has been successful. So why is this a problem? One, everybody is dealing with loads of data, different varieties of data, and there are multiple personas within your organization. So you start with business analysts to data scientists to machine learning engineers to BI developers and whatnot. Everybody has a different requirement on the data set in itself. So how do we make sure that customers can succeed becoming a data-driven company? AWS defines a three-pillared approach for a modern data strategy. So pillar one talks about modernization of your data infrastructure. So what does it really mean? So we talked about different varieties of data. So we talk about data in the structured format, we talk about data in unstructured data formats, time series, graph, key value pairs, and whatnot. There is no one size fits all to store all of this data in a single repository. So you have to start thinking about what kind of purpose-built data stores that are available for you to use for the kind of data that you need to store and process. So we'll get a little bit deeper into how do you modernize your data infrastructure to begin with within AWS. So one is about modernizing your data infrastructure. So just by modernizing it, you don't get to putting your data into action. So you need to start unifying the data from these different data infrastructures. So that's where we'll start thinking about data lakes, data lake houses, and whatnot, right? So, and how does AWS helps you in building a unified data architecture? Okay, so now you unified your data sets. So now you need to put your data into action, which is where you start innovating on your data platform. So that's where we will jump into the machine learning world, right? So what are the different machine learning capabilities on AWS, and how can you basically put your data to work in making the right set of decisions for your business? Okay, modernize. Right, so for every type of data structure, AWS has a service for you. So for relational data stores, that is Amazon Aurora, right? Amazon Aurora is your relational database, which is a serverless global database available for you. For non-relational databases and for every type of non-relational databases, there is a separate purpose-built data store available for you. So for example, graph databases, graph data, there is Neptune database. For documents, there is document database. And for key value pair, there is Dynamo and whatnot, right? Similarly, when you think about time stream data, we have time stream as a database as well. right? So it is important for you to understand what is the right set of service to use in terms of storing your data, right? Okay, so let's go to Unify. So now that you've modernized your data platform or your data infrastructure, now it is important for you to unify the data into a common data platform. So this is where the concept of centralized data lakehouses come into the picture. So what does unification mean? It's an ability for you to take the data from all these different data structures and putting it into a common repository. How do you want this common repository to be? Infinitely scalable, because the amount of data that you're going to deal with is going to be really huge. So you need an infinitely scalable data storage. Amazon S3 provides you that infinite data lake storage for you. For you to get the data into the data repo or the data lake storage, there are multiple services that are out there, each one focused on a specific set of data structure. So for example, you can use Glue as an ETL device for taking your data from your structured data into your data lake, or Kinesis Data Firehouse, which provides you an ability to take the streaming data out and putting it into your data lake storage and whatnot. So there are similarly a bunch of services that are available within AWS, which helps you collate the data into a common data lake. Okay, so now you've accumulated all your data into your data lake. What is the next step? So you have to catalog your data. So you need to know what is within the data lake. AWS Glue provides you an automated capability to scan through the entire data within your data lake storage and provides you a metadata structure on top of it. Okay, so now you've cataloged everything, you know what is within your data lake. So you need to make sure that your data lake is secure enough as to who has access control to what data. Lake formation provides you that governance around the data within your data lake, right? So the lake formation sits on top of the data lake, which ensures that the data is secure enough and the right person is provided access to the right data sets. And there are multiple rules and stuff that you can basically define within your lake formation. Fine. So now the data, you spent quite an amount of money in terms of taking the data from multiple data repos, storing it into your data lake, building a good governance around it. But the real value of data comes in driving the right set of decisions from the data or putting the data to work. So that is where you have a whole lot of analytics and business intelligence services from AWS, which helps you do it. For example, you want to build a data warehouse on the data lake, Redshift provides you with that capability. Now you can plug in Redshift right onto S3 and pull the data that is required for building your data warehouses. So if you want to do ad hoc queries onto the data lake, there is another service called Athena, which sits right on top of S3 and provides you a full view of what is within your S3. So you really don't have to pull the data out of S3 into a different storage or anything like that. Amazon Athena can run directly onto your S3. Similarly, there are services like Elasticsearch, EMR, for different kinds of workloads that you really want to run on the data lake. Okay, so we talked about quite a number of these services. It is going to be a bit of a headache if you are asked to manage all of these services by yourself, right? So AWS makes it serverless for you. For example, Glue, the capability for you to pull the data and create a catalog of the data is serverless. So you are not focused on building the infrastructure behind the Glue. You are focused on using Glue as a service, right? It is serverless. S3 is serverless. Redshift, in 2021 reInvent, we released Redshift as a serverless data warehousing capability as well. Similarly, EMR, serverless. So slowly we are moving towards alleviating the pain of managing your infrastructure and making you focus more on driving your decisions from the data rather than figuring out how to manage the infrastructure on the data. Right. So one is serverless, but how do you set all of these things up? So AWS has what we call as a serverless data lake framework. So within a few days, you can basically stand up your entire infrastructure of your data lakehouse using Redshift, using serverless data lake framework. right? So we looked at how we are basically building this entire data lake house, and this is a good picture, right? So we talked about having the data within S3 and all of these different capabilities like the EMRs of the world, Aurora, DynamoDB, Redshift of the world sitting on top of S3. It's just not a one-way communication, but it's a two-way communication. For example, Redshift provides you federated queries. What that basically means is that it can not only query S3 today, but it also can query your RDS. It can connect to DynamoDB. So it does federated queries across multiple repositories, not trying to move the data into Redshift, but federate the queries and get the results into Redshift. Similarly, Athena provides federated queries. So if you start looking at it, so we are not only providing serverless capabilities in terms of standing up your infrastructure, we are also providing federated queries in a way that you really don't have to move data across, but you can actually move the result set alone from the data. Right? Okay, so great. So we got serverless data lake framework, a super easy way for you to stand up data lake houses and everything. But what is the lake house end all solution for you? Right? So no, because as your organization is growing, it is really hard for you to have a centralized data lake house. So why is that, right? So let's take an example of oil and gas, right? So you got upstream, downstream, refining and marketing. You got supply and trading. You have different verticals within an oil and gas industry. Now, by standing up a centralized data lake house, you are forcing everybody into a single structure. So you are curtailing the innovation of each of these different verticals within your organization. So how do we make sure that there is control, but also innovation in terms of driving decisions from data? That's where the new concept came into picture, which is a data mesh. So data mesh, this is based on one of the articles written in 2019 by Martin Fowler and ThoughtWorks, who basically said that when you are driving a data platform, it doesn't have to be a one consolidated data platform where you have to push all the data into a single place. You could make it much more distributed based on how your organization is set up. So in the picture here, what we're seeing is basically three different lake houses at the bottom, right? So Amazon S3 as a data lake storage for three different functions. So one could be upstream, one could be midstream, one could be integrated supply and trading. But on top of all these different lake houses, there is a unified data governance on top of it. So we talked about lake formation. Now lake formation, AWS extends the lake formation across different accounts. It's a multi-account capability where lake formation can basically sit on different data lakes that are running in different accounts, which provides a unified governance for all the data within your data lake. Now consumers can start pulling data from any of those different data lakes depending upon their requirement, right? So now the whole data mesh architecture expands your capability of driving your data platform into a multi-tenanted model. So this is a good example, right? So tomorrow a new division comes across and says, hey, I want my own separate entity for building my own decisions from data. So you can plug a node into the data mesh and say, hey, this is your node, and this is connected to all the remaining set of data that we have collected so far, and you can start building your decisions right from the get-go, right? So it gives you a decentralized data domain, and you are more focused on building data products rather than trying to figure out how this whole data mesh works, right? Okay, so now we talked about modernization of the data, where we brought our existing data infrastructure into the newer sets of services. Once we brought that, we started getting into building a unified data platform. And how do we scale the data platform into a data mesh kind of an architecture? Now all of this money that has been spent is all about standing up and collating information on the data platform. Now let's put it to practice. This is where the innovate side of the dimension come into play. So one of AWS's primary focus is data science for everyone. So what does it basically mean? We talked about different personas within your organization: data engineers, data scientists, citizen developers, and BI engineers and whatnot, right? But how do we get data science? How do we enable them in data science for all of those folks? So this is where the layered ML stack capability of AWS comes into the picture. So at the top of the stack, what we have is AI services. Think of AI services as pre-built machine learning models that are available for use from the get-go. So you really don't need to have any kind of machine learning capability or AI capability for you to use these AI services. All you need to know is, how do I call this service using an API? And just by using the API, calling the service, you should be able to get the response back. Let's take one example out of that and dive a little bit deeper into it. One of the examples that I want to take is Comprehend, wherever that is. Right there under text and documents, right? Comprehend is an AI service. You give it a text, Comprehend will provide you all the key entities within the text. It will tell you what is the sentiment of the text. It will tell you if there are any PII data within the text and whatnot, right? The model that is built is developed by AWS. It is provided to you as a service, and you don't need to develop the model. You just need to call a Comprehend and say, give me the sentiment of this text, and Comprehend will do the work and send you the sentiment back. And what you're paying is just for that one call that you make to the Comprehend, and not for any of this data training or data preparation, model training. None of those things you're paying any money for, right? You're just paying money for the call that goes into Comprehend. Comprehend is just one example of it. So there are close to 15 to 20 plus services, AI services that are available out of the box, ready to use. And they span across text and documents, videos, images, and whatnot, right? We are also starting to look at developing these AI services per industry perspective, right? So we have a whole lot of AI services on the healthcare industry. We are looking at manufacturing and whatnot, right? So if you look at healthcare, we got Amazon Comprehend Medical, so which understands the medical terminologies. This Comprehend Medical is personalized to understand the medical terminologies. So if you give it Rx norm or whatever, it is able to understand the core meaning behind it and provide the information back to you. So that's all about AI services. So think of it as used by developers with no knowledge of machine learning capabilities. If you come down the layer, we have ML services. ML services are for data scientists who want to build an end-to-end machine learning model. Right? What is building an end-to-end machine learning model mean? Right? So you basically need a capability to get the data from your data platform, engineer the data based on your business requirements, train the model, and then deploy the model into production. So SageMaker Studio is one such capability. So SageMaker Studio behind the scenes has 20 plus services which are geared towards providing this immersive experience. So what you see is an integrated development environment where you can start building your models, preparing your data, and deploying the models right in one integrated environment, right? So you really don't have to move away from SageMaker Studio to build your models and deploy your models, right? So SageMaker Studio is just one capability for you to build the end-to-end model development and deployment lifecycle. In reInvent 2021, we released SageMaker Canvas. Think of Canvas as an AutoML capability. So this is about a business analyst who has the data but wants to build a model. So with no knowledge of machine learning or data science, using Canvas, you can build your own model with just drag and drop and clicks, right? And the model can be developed in a matter of less than minutes, in a few minutes. Finally, the third layer is the ML frameworks and infrastructure. So this is for the hardcore data machine learning specialist and data scientists who want to bring their own models, who want to build their own algorithms on specific ML frameworks, like the likes of PyTorch, MXNet, TensorFlow, Keras, and whatnot, and also want to use the high-powered GPUs behind the scenes, right? So as you can see, the entire ML stack of how you basically drive decisions from your data is catered towards different sets of personas across your organization. So we talked a lot about building models and driving decisions out of it. But how do you start deploying these models into production? So AWS is now making sure that, so one way to deploy the model is basically, exposing your model as an inference endpoint or using a batch transform to run it on your data platform. But that's one way to it, where you are bringing your data to the model. So what if you take the model to the data itself? So that's where AWS is starting to work with each of our data services and bringing the model capability onto the data, right? So for example, Amazon Aurora ML. So say you have built a model in SageMaker, you can basically take the model and deploy it on Aurora ML directly. You do not have to have some intermediate service for you to read data from Aurora and call the ML service. You can basically have that model running in Aurora itself. Similarly, we are expanding our model, bringing the model to the data closer capability onto Neptune, Redshift, Athena, QuickSight, and a whole lot of services, right? So what we've seen from the beginning is basically modernizing your data infrastructure, to building your data lake, to scaling your data lake houses into a data mesh, and bringing your machine learning capabilities on driving decisions onto the data, right? Well, you're not alone. We are working with a whole lot of customers in driving them in this direction and in this journey. One best way for you to do it is do it yourself. There is a whole lot of immersion days, documentation, frameworks, and deployment accelerators that are available for all kinds of data services and architecture patterns that I discussed that are available for you if you're interested to do it yourself, right? We work with a whole lot of SI partners, GSI partners, to name a few: Accentures, IBMs, Slaloms, Infosys, Wipro. We work with a whole lot of those partners, and we enable them to drive decisions. Last but not the least, you can also come to us in terms of, we have multiple offerings like data-driven everything, data labs, solutions lab, and we have our own ML professional services as well, help you in this journey. That's all I have for today. I'm happy to take any questions if you have.